My name is Liezel Rubin, and I am a photographer.
So tell me a little bit about what you were doing before you came to the work that you're exhibiting now at MADE.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. So the work that I was doing before is actually completely different than what I'm presenting at MADE. I did a lot of photography. It's all the same. It's photography. But my previous work was very on the edge of camp, where I had very outrageous characters. I had little people that I used throughout my shoots, drunken clowns with fetish models, and all sorts of zany characters like old ladies and fetish models, and a lot of them were all about different stories, but the whole purpose was to push boundaries and to go on the edge of, camp, to be campy, not go on the edge of it. So you had like a lot of photographers that were pinup photographers, erotic photographers. Well, that's what I was, but I took it to a different level because I wanted to find the humor in all of it, and I wanted to have a good time while doing it.
Also, the work was you were creating these theatrical happenings, these scenes, these moments, or these unfolding moments.
Yes, and they all had storylines. I mean, they were like, I had one where it was a midget pimp and all these prostitutes. One of the prostitutes was a chick with a dick on roller skates, because I thought it was really fun to say that. So I wanted to be able to say chick with the dick on roller skates all the time. And so it was, all sorts of zany characters. But they all had storylines, and a lot of it was based on white trash. And a lot of it was just based on sexuality. Like one photo shoot, we turned a bus into a whorehouse on wheels. And then we had all sorts of crazy characters within that, mixed within the fetish models. And so, I remember doing one shoot where it was a clown party, an Emmy party. They called some strippers. Strippers showed up, and then, next thing you know, clowns are making out with strippers, and they're playing Twister, and it's just crazy. So, yeah, it's, and the work I do now is completely different. Back then, it was a lot of time and a lot of money working with film and having to have makeup artists and set up location shoots and everything that was involved with producing one photo shoot to produce for one show was just, it was outrageous as well as the shoots were. But it was well worth it. I wouldn't trade that for anything. Now the difference between what I do now is I actually started working with people that I know, shooting them, and some of them it worked and some of them it didn't. The ones that it worked with were actually people who are used to doing their character. For instance, the magician. Like, this is someone who is a costume designer. He does the pirate for the Renaissance, so he does all that stuff all the time, so he's very in tune with who his character is, versus friends that are, we just put clothes on and we tried it didn't read. So I ended up thinking about it and decided, why not go to Renaissance fairs, Civil War reenactments, Dickens Festival, because all those people, they've been doing this for years. They've got their characters down, their wardrobes, everything to a T. So that's what I started doing. It saved me a lot in terms of, all the costs of costume and makeup and all that, because it was already completely handled for themselves. So then it was the next step. My original photography I used to do was raw. Like, I didn't do any editing to it. It is what it is. The work I do now is all Photoshop. So I photograph, I go to Renaissance fairs and all that, and I photograph everything. I photograph people posing for me, I photograph people walking away, people doing different movements, and I even, when I'm visualizing killing someone in a photo, I've gone to the extremes of having them do the different poses to ascending or descending. And or with the Siamese twins, I'll have them do different poses where they're going to be both sides of the whole. So then it's basically a lot of editing and using channels in Photoshop to clip out what I want to use out of each picture, and then creating the storyline, and then creating it by layering and doing special effects and layering. So each piece usually takes, it could be around 40 hours, give or take. And the same with layers. As far as Photoshop layers, it could be 60 to 100 layers. So I have some raw, the layered files for some of these are like 1 gig, bigger than that, 1.2 gigs. So.
And how many images do you have in this particular show it made?
So in the show it made, I think it's around 40, around 38.
So if you multiply 40 times 40 or whatever, that's a lot of hours.
Well, this is like maybe 1/3 of the work.
Right.
I mean, I have a lot of pieces that are not in the show, a lot of sideshow pieces, a lot of ghosted pieces that there just wasn't enough room.
So what sent you from where you were doing these sort of theatrical scenes where it was all raw and immediate to these very, very complicated Photoshop-based, the work that you're doing now? What was that transition?
Death. So now my new work is really about the other world, this world, all the different levels of this isn't just it. This can't just be it. I mean, there's so much more to existence than this. And so it touches on the different ways that we may interact or see spirits. And it came from my best friend growing up. She passed away at 39 years old, and left. I was pretty devastated. Her ex-husband lives in Sweden, and so her 3-year-old son, who I was helping raise, went to Sweden, and you kind of left with not just a person dying, but kind of losing everything. And I went into a dark place, and I really didn't know how I was going to get out of it. And it took this work for me to look at this and look at myself and look at, communicating with the dead, which I've done for, throughout my life on many occasions, whether it's like going to a cemetery and getting orbs or really weird things in my pictures, or actually communicating with spirits. I mean, I've done it, but when someone that close to you dies, I don't know, it's a whole different story than just, dealing with spirits or spirituality or whatever. That's when I actually looked into myself to try and find myself, to try and make sense of it, to try and, because she died really unexpectedly. It was like an aneurysm, and then she was gone. So for me, this work really saved my life. I mean, I did it in the dark. I worked in the dark. I worked through the night, till 3, 4 in the morning. Slept in the day. I didn't leave the house unless I had to. And, after getting through a large part of it, it just kind of was a release to me, and it was like, it's, she may be gone, but she's always going to be there, and she still is there, and now I have this work that really resonates within me to really look at how we communicate, how we can learn from it, how we can evolve ourselves through understanding it.
You've shown the work a few times. I know that you've shown it locally a couple times, and I'm just curious, how do people engage with it? Have you noticed how people kind of communicate with and respond to the work?
You know, it wasn't until this show, I mean, you know, the first show that I showed at was a gallery in San Pedro. And I mean, people liked it, and I sold some work, but there was, I don't know, it was lacking in the experience part of it, you know, in the people sharing their experience part of it. The other show was at Portfolio, and there wasn't really an opening or anything like that. It was up there and people really liked it, and that's great, but there was no like open communication about it. And it was at Made that like it became a conversation. It became something that caused people to communicate with each other and share their ideas or feelings.
I see. Can you talk a little bit about a particular piece, kind of break it down and explain the process that you went through to bring all of the elements together?
Okay, sure. What piece?
Well, I know that you were saying that the first piece that you worked on...
The Magician.
...was The Magician, yeah.
Okay. So The Magician, I've actually expanded from the original piece, which was called Levitation Fantastic. And basically, that one the person, I shot him in my studio. And so basically, I had him do a lot of different poses, you know, to be able to do lots of different magic tricks. So this one, basically, he was doing this with his fingers, and what I did was I created a stage, and with different photos that I had, clipped out curtains, did a wood stage, kind of vintagey looking, and then I started shooting what objects, like a grandfather clock, a rabbit in a hat, and other elements that are in it. And basically the whole idea was that as he lifted his fingers and made himself float, so would everything on stage float. So what I did was I shot all the different elements that I was going to use. I went into Photoshop and I clipped him out, and then I'm not going to tell you the tricks on how I make the smoky effects and all that, but it's not just one layer. It's a combination of different layers with different settings and different opacities, overlapping and not overlapping, that create the realistic perspective. So like you look at a shadow of yourself on the floor, it's not just like people who go into Photoshop and they go, okay, choose shadow on that layer. That's not how shadows work. That's not natural. A shadow is different depending on the different aspects of light. It's going to go in different directions, and maybe this direction it's going to tweak a little and warp. This one it's going to be darker and solid, closer to your foot or whatever. So I did a lot of special effects like that, and what I did was like also dropping the shadows on the ground. You know, that's the thing. It's got to be overlapped and different opacities and different settings.
So
what else?
Why don't you give me some more detail about some of the other images that you have in the show?
Okay. So let's see. Well, some of the work has ghosts in it. Some have orbs in it. Some really look more at spirituality. than it does spirits or ghosts. So it's kind of covering spirituality, spirits, ghosts, magic, and make-believe. One of the pieces, for example, that talks about ghosts, it's Civil War doctor. It's actually not even the doctor. It's who's the dead guy?
Undertaker?
The Undertaker, thank you very much. So it's a picture of an Undertaker standing in mourning next to a young man who is dead in a coffin. And he's tilted up so you can, so he's posing like side by side. And in that piece, what I did was I took other images where I clipped out the boy that's in the coffin, and I turned him into a ghost that was coming out of his own flesh belly. So it's, about when the soul leaves the body, when the body leaves the soul, when the soul leaves the body, and what that could look like. And in this instance, it just, I just felt that coming out of his core was the way to depict it. Other instances, another piece that I did that a lot of people, once I started doing this work and people were seeing my work and I was, becoming friendly and familiar with the people at the Renaissance fairs and Dickens festivals and such, someone was telling me a story about Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln, and how after he died, she was very, very much into spirits and spirituality and ghosts, and would do seances all the time. And they told me about a photo sitting she did for herself, and that they ghosted in Abraham Lincoln's face in the background, and how that affected her on such an intense level that she held on to that photo and kept it near to her death. And it just had such an intense impact on her, and how she felt about him dying, and how she felt about her connection with him and connection with the dead, that I felt impelled to reenact that photo. And so I did it to a different level, where it was the entire sitting, not just the torso. And I actually didn't even photograph Mary Todd and Abraham together. One was photographed in San Pedro at one of their events, and the other one was photographed, I think Huntington Beach Civil War reenactment was where I photographed Abraham Lincoln. And basically she was sitting, so that was the easy part. And for him, I just wanted his hand out so it rested on her shoulder, so there was a physical connection between the two. And so that was a fun challenge. It was something that I really, really wanted to do, and do it to a more advanced level with technology today versus back then. So I really enjoyed doing that. And there were pieces where I have a boy who's, fading out in the legs, and he's running across the battlefield. And that really was to tell the story about the young kids. A lot of young boys died in the war, and a lot of them were messengers. And in this piece, I just wanted to depict that, he's going to deliver a message, and he's going through the battlefields, and he never made it, yet here his ghost is still trying to deliver that message.
You also have several images of Siamese twins.
Yes.
In the show.
I have Siamese twins. I did a recreation that's not in the show of The Elephant Man, where he had done a press sitting where they photographed him and stuff, and I recreated that. I turned normal people into little people. I've done a lot of stuff like that, and I've just had a connection with the sideshow and freaks since I was young. So it was just another way to incorporate that, to pay homage to those people who are, of course, long gone and ghosts now. I also did a few pieces on the what's the guy? The guy that killed all the people in London.
Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, Jack the Ripper. I did a couple Jack the Ripper pieces too. That I don't know. I wanted to touch on different subjects, whether it be a negative versus positive. I mean, when I was working for the Queen Mary, you know, going down the hallway where B340 actually is, the room where this man who killed all these people and then took his own life, you know, you can feel the energy, and it's a negative energy. And when you look at spirituality and ghosts and that kind of thing, you know, you have to look at everything. You have to look at the negative and the positive. And so, I mean, there's images of, you know, demons coming through, like devilish looking people, or what's ghosted in the background of the images of someone standing there is that, you know, there's some of the pieces I did where people's reflections, you know, in a mirror come back. Is I did which is not in the show. I actually was hired to do this, Marie Antoinette, where her reflection, one of them, her head was decapitated, and there was like the gallows. You could see the gallows in the reflection in the mirror with her head in a basket, and you know, I did different ones of her. So it's about looking at all the aspects of it.
And the question that I meant to ask you earlier is, you mentioned that this was something that you've been connected with since your childhood. How did that happen?
You mean
like sideshows and?
Oh, I just had a thing. Ever since I was young, I had a thing for little people, for clowns, for the weirdness. You know, I remember I worked at Long Beach Convention Center, and I was an usher for many years when I was 18. And, you know, that's when the three-ring circus, Pete, Barnum and Bailey would come to town. And you wouldn't find me the week they were in town. I would be down at the trains hanging out in, like, Weird Zone. I mean, it was like, you ever see Water for Elephants? Where these people stick together, all the different, you know, in all the different cultures, all the different groups of people, they isolated themselves and they stuck within their own. And it was fascinating to go down there and be in that world. Even till, what was it, maybe 4 years ago maybe, there was a Italian circus that came to town. I ended up meeting one of the contortionists, and I spent the entire weekend at the circus, and that was incredible. That was like a experience in a lifetime, just like hanging down at the train tracks with the others was. But it was the matriarch of the family passed away, and he ran the circus, so it was there was this whole service of it passing down to the next generation, and they had the table going across the ring with the white cloth on it, and bread and wine, and it was a big feast. It was an incredible experience. I don't know. I mean, I was a clown for 8 years, so I don't know. I've just always had a thing.
And then, you've done this amazing amount of work that with all this time and thought and artistry. What's next for you? Where are you planning to go from here?
More death. Well, no, I mean, yeah, more death. I have so much work that I've already clipped the people out and just haven't had time to start those pieces, because again, one piece takes a long time. But, you know, hopefully in the next few months I'll be able to get back to that and start working on some new pieces. I like what I'm working on now. I don't object to like shooting with little people and fetish models I'll still do that too. Like, I'm open to everything. I definitely like to do lots of road trips. I have a whole series I've done for many, many, many years where everywhere I go, whenever I go on vacation or road trips, I always stop in cemeteries. And generally, they're really off-the-wall cemeteries or historical cemeteries. And so I have years and years and years of documenting cemeteries all over the place as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.